That's amazing. Um, so I kind of want to just get started with talking about what salvia is, because it's a name that, is it a mushroom? Is it a plant? Like what is salvia? So that way everyone kind of knows what this conversation is about to begin with.
That's an excellent starting point. Yeah. Because I mean, many people don't know about salvia other than it used to be legal everywhere in the United States. And it was sold in these little, head shops and gas stations as the super concentrated extract. And it was sold as what looked like little just flakes of sort of looks like fish food. That's what the extract looks like, green fish food. So people didn't really make an association with the salvia substance with a particular plant. And so there's almost 1,000 different types of salvia. Rosemary is actually a salvia. Rosemary is Salvia rosmarinus. And the sage that you cook with is Salvia officinalis. And there's Salvia splendens, Salvia melissodora. There's a bunch of different salvias. And but then there's this one particular salvia, Salvia divinorum, and that's endemic to the Sierra Mazateca mountain range outside of Oaxaca, Mexico. And so it grew there in the cloud forests. And actually, I have a salvia plant right here. This- I brought this one in from outside this morning. So this is salvia, and so it's part of the mint family, actually, or the sage family. And you can see similar to mint, it has these diametrically opposed leaves. And like other mints, it's got a square stem instead of a round stem. And there's some pretty cool symbolism with if you take a cross section of the stem, which I can get to into a little bit. But so yeah, this is Salvia divinorum, and there's nothing particular about it that, if you rub the leaves and smell it, it doesn't smell like anything. And you'll see these leaves are a little bit yellow because they've been getting a little bit too much direct sunlight. So it's actually a shade-loving plant because it's used to growing in the cloud forest up in the canopies of the Sierra Mazateca mountain range. So it likes a higher humidity, likes well-drained, fertile, rich soil, and so this is the plant itself, and it was used indigenously by chewing the fresh leaves versus drying and smoking them. And so there's multiple routes of administration, and we can get into that as well. But yeah, so of the almost 1,000 different types of salvias that there are, this is the only one that has very potent conscious altering effects. It's actually one of the most potent naturally occurring substances on the planet. Um, it's not technically a psychedelic because it works on different receptors in the brain, and but it is, only a dose of like 1 milligram is more than enough to be uncomfortable. And so dosing is very important and it's easy to take too much. And so that's why, a large part of my education about salvia is proper dosage as well. But yeah, it's just this magical, mystical plant that doesn't have much history of use. And the Sierra Mazateca curanderos use it primarily for healing physical illnesses. And so it is potent anti-inflammatory effects, potent painkiller, really good for intestinal distress, arthritic pain, and also helping with opiate and cocaine withdrawals.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Hmm.
So, um, all right. So kind of, I love that is in the mint family. I don't know why, but I just really
Hmm.
love all the
Hmm.
mint family species. I I am curious about then kind of like what's the mechanism of action for salvia because it's not, like a typical psychedelic, right? So do you how does that how does that work? Because I think a lot of people are that are coming into this space, at least over here on psychedelic revelations, are probably more familiar with psychedelics. So just trying
Hmm.
to like the common ones like the SSRI or SSRI, serotonin based
Hmm.
psychedelics.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, exactly. So, the regular psychedelics work on the 5-HT2A receptors. And so they interact with serotonin, but salvia doesn't touch the 5-HT2A receptors at all. Salvia only affects what's called the kappa opioid receptor system. And so there's three receptor systems that have to deal with opioids. There's the kappa, mu, and delta. And so when you take a prescription painkiller, for example, it affects the mu opioid receptor. And what that happens then is it increases your dopamine levels, and then you have this like numbing effect and zoning out effect. But then the painkiller wears off, and you come back down to baseline. And relatively speaking, your regular dopamine levels now feel kind of blah by comparison, because you had this artificial boost, and then you come back down. Um, it's the opposite with salvia. So with salvia, you take salvia and it can temporarily, for a very short amount of time, lower your dopamine levels. And then when the salvia wears off, your dopamine levels go back up to normal. And so then, relatively speaking, your natural baseline of dopamine levels actually feels better than it did before. Because a lot of our moods have to do with how we feel relative to how we were feeling before. And so Salvia just does a very good job of bringing one to a nice neutral baseline. But it doesn't have the same addictive qualities that happen to the body physiologically when the mu opioid receptors get activated. So with Salvia, you actually need less of it over time. And so there's this thing called reverse tolerance. So you need less of it over time. You become more sensitive to it, and there's absolutely zero compulsion to want to do it more, even if one has a pleasant, euphoric, wonderful experience. Just because of how it works physiologically in the system, you don't really want to go back and do it more. So you kind of have to approach it from a place of mindfulness. Now, given the fact that it works on a system other than the serotonin system, it means that it can actually be very helpful for people who are currently on antidepressants and SSRIs, and they can use salvia without there being that negative contraindication there, because it's also a very potent antidepressant as well.
Okay. Um, there's a
That's a
lot.
mouthful.
I know. Like that was a lot for me, like to take in, just because I personally am less familiar with the opioid system, so I'm more familiar with like the serotonin. Definitely very familiar with the dopamine as someone with ADHD, and I work with people with ADHD. So when you were
Yeah.
talking about that, my brain immediately was like, "Ooh, this
Hmm.
sounds like um a good option for people that do struggle with ADHD."
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, like, how did you even find this plan? Like, how did it come into your world?
Yeah. So I mean, I was in high school when I first heard about it. I remember I was in 12th grade and I was in so it used to be legal everywhere, but then in 2008, it got made illegal in certain states. So salvia is federally legal, and it is legal or illegal on a state by state basis. And so, it's legal in California, you have to be above 18. It's illegal in Texas. Like all the places where you'd assume it would be illegal, it's going to be illegal. And all the places where you'd assume it would be legal, it's legal there. And it was actually going to be made illegal on a federal level, but some of the researchers from Johns Hopkins, specifically Matthew Johnson, I believe he went and testified in front of Congress, and he was like, "Hey, there's a lot of potential therapeutic value to this plant with regards to addiction and pain medication." And he must have given a persuasive enough argument to where it wasn't made illegal on the federal level. And so when I was still in high school, though, you could get it anywhere. And so I remember just one day this kid was sitting in front of me in my physics class, and he turned to me and he was like, "Hey, Chris, have you heard of this crazy thing called salvia?" I was like, "No, what's that?" And he's like, "Oh man, it's weird. Like you can get it at like the local smoke shop here, and you smoke it, and it's just you're high for like 3 minutes, and it's really weird, and then it's over." And he was like, "It's wild." And I was like, "That sounds awesome. Sign me up," you know? And so that day I left school and I went to the local smoke shop and I got this little thing of green, like powdery, flaky stuff. And, I asked the guy at the smoke shop, like, what do I do? How much do I smoke? And he was like, well, it's not technically for human consumption, so we can't tell you how much to smoke. Um, but if you were to smoke it, just load a big bowl and use a torch lighter and just smoke as much as you can in a really short amount of time. And I was like, okay. And so I went home and I smoked it, and it was just bizarre. It felt like I just felt like forces pulling on my body, and it kind of felt like I was being stretched a little bit, and I kind of felt like I was being flattened out and pulled, and everything just felt wonky. Um, but in a very um, like objective, tactile way. I felt these energies pulling on my body. Um, but it didn't really seem to carry much importance or significance or anything. It didn't bring any creative thought patterns or anything like that. It wasn't like cannabis at all. Um, and I was like, that's weird. That just doesn't really seem to carry much value. And then some months went by and I tried it again, and it was weird. I just like laughed hysterically for no reason, had a trip that I couldn't really put into words, and then it wore off. And so this went on for a couple of years. Every like couple of months or 3 or 4 months, I'd smoke some salvia. Um, it would be odd, and then I'd come back to normal. But then it really changed when by then I was in my final years in college, and I was going to smoke some salvia after not having done it for well over a year. And before I smoked the salvia, I heard of like a very strong voice within that said, almost like stop me in my tracks. It said, wait. And it said, meditate first. And I was like, that was a weird, intrusive thought that came up so specifically and suddenly. Might as well listen to that. And so all I did is just took 10 slow, deep breaths before smoking it. And so I just closed my eyes, took 10 deep breaths, and smoked that same salvia that I've been had for all those years. So it was the exact same stuff. Um, and I smoked it, and all of a sudden, the experience came on in a completely different way. Rather than it just being disorienting and as if there were weird forces pulling on my body, I saw these visuals start to come in from my peripheral vision, like grid lines coming into the meeting in the middle. And I saw these lines sort of create a veil over my reality, and I could see that there were sand dunes. And then behind the sand dunes, I saw like a sun rising and setting simultaneously. So I was just seeing this passage of time, and I could still see my apartment, but also at the same time, I could see through this veil that had been placed over mine. Um, and then to my left, about maybe like 5 feet to my left and in front of me, out of these lines, this feminine entity appeared. And I saw her and standing there. And rather than be surprised, because I'd never had any entity experience at all, and so rather than be surprised, what I actually found myself saying out loud is I said, "Oh, there you are." And this feminine, very strong, loving feminine energy said, telepathically, she said to me, like, yes, here I am, and I've always been here. And so, as if like I've been with you for, before you're even a human type thing. Like there was such this long standing connection that I had with this being. And so that's what it said to me verbally. And then it kind of extended its lines of energy out to me and just sort of wrapped itself around me. And what I thought at the time was, I thought I'm being wrapped by a smile, and there was just like this smile wrapping around me. And me and this energetic being just communicated for about like 3 or 4 minutes, just really connecting deeply with each other. And then it kind of faded, and everything faded, and I came back, and the visuals faded, and I was back to normal. This was all in the span of 5, 6, 7 minutes. Um, and I was completely blown away because I was like, well, hang on a second. This is literally the same stuff I've been smoking for years now. Um, and so that cued me into the fact that there was something about approaching the plant with intentionality made a huge difference, night and day. I'd done mushrooms recreationally, and I was just like, woohoo, mushrooms, let's eat mushrooms and have some fun. It wasn't like, okay, I'm going to meditate and take my mushrooms, because I was a young college kid growing them in the closet in my room, and so yeah, uh, it was astounding that it seemed as if there was some intelligent knowing that existed within the plant. And it knew the moment I took it seriously, it showed itself to me. Um, and so that was sort of like the beginning of this long process that I've been on.
Okay, there's a lot there that where I want to go. I absolutely love how you said it felt like you were being wrapped in a smile. Like that's just a beautiful like imagery. Um, so you've said this a couple times, and just in your explanation right now, you said that it's actually fast acting. I
Mhm.
don't think I ever have heard anyone say that one way or the other. Interestingly, like I had no idea how long it is. So is it usually 3 to 4 minutes, or this time you said it was 5 to 7? What is
Mhm.
what is that kind of journey like?
Right, right. So that depends on the route of ingestion. So so the way it's used traditionally is they'll take, you'll take these leaves and you'll request them from the plant, and then you stack them up, usually in pairs, and they make what's called a quid. And a quid is when you take the leaves and you roll it up sort of like a cigar, and then you chew, 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 and you chew it, and then you hold the leaves in your mouth for at least 30 minutes, because if you swallow salvia, it doesn't get absorbed into the system. It only gets absorbed orally through the buccal membranes on the inside of your cheeks. And
Okay.
so, yeah, so you've got to hold it and you have to make as much surface contact with the inside of your cheeks. And so that the effects come on in about 20 to 30 minutes. You will peak after about 40 minutes. You'll stay around that peak for, maybe another 40 minutes, and then you slowly come down. So if you chew it, the whole experience is about an hour and a half to 2 hours. It's a much slower onset. Um, it doesn't come on as quickly. It lasts longer. I find the afterglow lasts a little bit longer as well when you chew it versus smoke it. And you can still go very, very deep with the chewing method, but it's very cumbersome. Most people don't have access to fresh salvia leaves. You can chew dried salvia leaves as well. So you can take these leaves here and just let it dry, and you can grind it up into a powder and chew that and have the same effect. But it's pretty cumbersome, and most people don't notice the effects at first. Um, Now then, if you smoke it, the effects come on in about 20 to 30 seconds. You peak after about a minute to 2 minutes. The peak lasts for about, 2 minutes. So then that takes you to like the 5 minute mark. And then at the 5 minute mark, you kind of like slowly start to come back. And I'd say after about, you know, 10 minutes, one's completely back to normal. And so that's just if you smoke like one dose. So what people are generally doing though is because there's misinformation there about salvia, what they're doing is they're getting this concentrated extract, they're smoking it, and they're going from 0 to 10 within, you know, 0 being no experience, 10 being too far. Um, and so they're going from that to that within seconds, and the mind, the body, the psyche, the awareness doesn't have time to catch up with it. And so this can be very unnerving. Since it's such a tactile medicine, you can actually feel your psyche leaving its body, or people feel themselves getting stretched out into a flat two-dimensional plane, or being rolled up like a carpet, or becoming an inanimate object, or becoming a cog in one of many cogs in a big gear system, or becoming a book, and you feel yourself as a book, and pages are being turned through you, or you become a wheel that's busy spinning. There's like a lot of archetypal experiences that come up for people. It's very common, yeah, to become a zipper. People, you can feel yourself becoming unzipped. Like one time I smoked a large bowl and I felt my midline becoming unzipped, and this part of my body moved through space this way, and this part moved through this space. So it can actually feel quite nice if you know what to expect. It can sort of feel like a energetic chiropractic adjustment.
Mm.
Uh, but still, it can be unnerving. You can get amnesia at the high doses, so you can forget that you smoked salvia. And so you forgot that you smoked salvia, but then all of a sudden the entire world doesn't exist anymore. So then your mind tries to like make all these conclusions like, oh no, I broke reality, or I'm dead. So I like to steer people away from those experiences. So rather than smoke just one bowl and have a quick in and out, what I do is I have people smoke multiple light doses with about 5 to 10 minutes between bowls. And so, and so that's where you can, rather than have a brief in and out experience, you can dip your toe in, see what that's like, and then kind of come back to normal. And then we smoke another little dose, you go a little bit deeper. So it's this stair step pendulating, swinging back and forth, where you slowly go into salvia space, observing what's happening at each depth of the experience. And because you're going slowly into the space, you're able to have your awareness track and feel the experience as it moves its way through your body. So it's a very somatic, body-based, focusing medicine, which is also helpful for people who have trouble meditating or who have ADHD and they have trouble focusing on any specific thing. Salvia can make your focus like laser focused. And it makes sitting still actually be very pleasurable. It makes meditating very easy. It quiets the mind. So, at a low dose, it's extremely embodying, and at a high dose, it's completely dissociative. And so there's a broad spectrum of how it can be engaged with.
It's interesting because when you were talking about that, that reminds me a bit of 5M Neo, at least the way I was trained on it, where you step people through. And
Mm-hmm.
when you're in those lower relational doses, it's very embodying and you're very present and you're um, so I like that. So thank you for being such a wealth of knowledge, by the way. This is really fun for me to be able to ask all these questions right here. Is anything popping up for you, Dana, since you're
Yeah,
here?
so much. I am really, really new to salvia, so I'm just like mesmerized and just taking it all in, and so many questions popping up. I think one of the first ones is you're talking about it growing just in this one place in Oaxaca in the cloud forest, which I have just returned from.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah.
Interesting.
And you mentioned that there's not much history of use, but I'm just curious what you do know of historic use and how we got to know about this beautiful plant medicine.
Right, right. So the funny thing is, there's no, as far as I've heard and as far as been told to me, there's no indigenous name for Salvia Divinorum. Um, they call her Ska Maria Pastora, or Hojas de Pastora, Eyes of the Shepherdess, but they believe she's the embodiment of the Virgin Mary. And but all the plant medicines, they have both the Christian assigned name and then there's the indigenous name as well. And but for salvia, there's no indigenous name, which leads one to believe that it's kind of one of the newer kids on the block. Um, there's not as long of a history of using salvia as the other medicines that they use. And it also generally only propagates by taking a cutting and by making a clone of it. So it rarely goes to seed. And when it does go to seed, most of the seeds are not viable. And so, but yet it's many places over the mountains there. So there had to be some human interaction where people were, cultivating it, because you got to take a cutting and then root it in water and then replant it. And then, so it actually takes a lot of human tending. But there's no record or history of who did that human tending to get the plant to be as prolific as it is around there. And so it's, yeah, yeah, the thing is, it's interesting that it is sort of relatively newer for them to be using. Um, but the lessons that Salvia actually has to teach one many times are almost futuristic in a way. One gets messages about the multiverses, for example, or time travel is a very common one. Um, it's very, one can actually travel back in time with Salvia, where you can become your younger self, or sometimes people feel as if they're becoming someone else in the past. Um, it's very common for people to feel like they're going back to the 1950s. I was working with someone recently, and he said that he felt like he was floating over a train station in the late 1920s. And it actually feels as if you've gone back to that time. And so, yeah, but generally, and there's also something more secretive about salvia. Um, and there's something about the salvia experience itself that's quite secretive, where one can, the more you work with salvia, the less people actually want to talk about their experiences. And there's oftentimes a message that salvia gives to people, like, hey, don't share this with anyone else. This is your private, intimate experience with you and yourself. And you're actually, the more you just blab on about your experiences that you had as intimate moments with yourself, you're actually diluting the experience and giving away its power. So there was something about, the healthy sacred secrets that you keep with yourself. And just don't be exposing everything to everyone and sharing everything all the time because you're watering it down. And I'll be working with clients sometime, and they'll want to say to me what's happening during the experience, but then Salvi will come in and be like, shh, like she'll actually like shush one, like, no, 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 this is just between us. So it's a very private, communal um, uh, experience, and so yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes, that is so fascinating. Actually, I'm so curious now.
Mhm.
And I do have one more question is you know, you said you're a somatic salvia guide. So I'm curious, how do you work with clients? And
Mhm.
also what is drawing them to you? Like what are they seeking when they come to work with salvia in a somatic way with you?
Right, right. So, I mean, it's a broad range. And many people are people, I've worked with people who are just curious psychonauts and they just want to see what it's like. So there's a few categories. Some people, they smoked salvia years ago, had a scary experience, and they're like, you know what, like 20 years ago, I smoked salvia and it was terrifying, but I'm still fascinated by what happened. And I feel like that there's something there for me. And so many people, they want to work with me to rewrite their initial negative experiences that they had with salvia. And there are other people who want to use it for addiction, depression, and anxiety. It's very, very helpful for treating anxiety. Um, there's someone I know, if he's having a panic attack, he'll smoke salvia in the midst of a panic attack, and it'll just completely stop it right in its tracks. Um, it's nice because, there are certain times when, let's say you're in a foul mood or you're grumpy and you're like, no way am I going to be doing my microdose today, or no way would I take mushrooms today because that's just like a recipe for disaster given the state that I'm in and all the stressors of life and the world is weighing on my shoulders and all these things. But with salvia, you can be in whatever state you are and smoke just a little bit. And it is just so grounding and rooting. And I like to think about it as a really great neutralizer. If you're up and manic, it'll kind of bring you down. And if you're feeling like down and depressed and lethargic, it'll bring you up. So salvia does a really good job of just bringing one to a felt place of homeostasis. Um, and it gives one that laser-like focus as well. And so the somatic component comes in because salvia is such a tactile experience that, the doses that I start to work with people at, well, we start with like half a dose. and um, smoke one, sit there with the eyes closed, and then you're sort of just seeing what you notice and where. And people feel maybe even something starting to happen outside of themselves. They'll be like, oh, there's like I feel this spinning feeling happening a little bit in front of me over here. And then they'll see it like coming closer, but then hovering right there. Or they'll just feel themselves feeling like a little bit bigger. It's a very good medicine at helping one feel the spaciousness within oneself. And I think that's also why it's so helpful for anxiety and depression and general stressors in life, because it can make you feel very, very big. Um, in like a grounded, empowered way, not like in a illusions of grandeur way as well. Um, so, I was working with someone just a couple months ago, and he was sitting there. We've been working together for a couple of weeks, and I saw him like sit up, and he was like, "Oh wow, like Salvia is showing me like how big I actually am, like his personal human power." He's like, "Wow, like." And then she proceeded to show him how he makes himself small. And she actually showed him in it how the ways in which he holds his body, you know, and there was like a felt internal contraction that happened within a specific space in his body. And it was like that area right there, like that's what gets activated, and that's what makes you feel small, and that's what makes you collapse, and that's what holds yourself back from truly just living your own life in an embodied way. Um, and so it's just, it can be so focused on where it goes specifically in the body that says, here's where a block is, here's how we open the block. Um, so, one can also oftentimes feel salvia scanning your body. I like to say that at least with the first few sessions, you're just presenting yourself to salvia, and she's getting to know you, and you're getting to know her. It's just like a gentle meet and greet. You're not putting any expectations or demands on anyone. Um, if you were to go on a first date with someone and all of a sudden they were to put demands on you, you'd be like, ooh, red flag. But so it's just like, hey, I'm just gonna sit and observe, and we're gonna observe each other. And then because it's so tactile, you can actually feel the salvia energy going through your body and scanning and seeing like, okay, this is how we put together here, this is how we put together over here. Um, you know, like someone I was working with just a week ago, she was saying, she was just like, oh wow, like Salvia has shown me where in the specific area in my back body, like behind me, I can just like it showed her where a safe space was in her body. She was just like, oh, it's so easy to rest right there. So then what you can do is you can have these salvia sessions where you get very clear tactile body work type feedback on where certain things are or are not in your body. And then you can incorporate that into a non-salvia meditation, If you're feeling stressed, you can be like, oh, I remember last time I was with Salvia, it showed me that I can actually, this is what the scaffolding of my skeleton feels like. Or this is where there's a pocket of openness below my third vertebra or something like that. And so, um, yeah, and there's also just, again, like very emotionally um, like neutralizing, but without numbing one. So it can, it can settle the activated nervous system, but you don't check out or you don't zone out. Like, so if you take Xanax, it might settle the nervous system, but then the Xanax wears off and it comes flooding back. And so with salvia, it can settle the anxiety, but because your consciousness can remain so clear with salvia, it still gives you the opportunity to engage with your body rather than just bypass.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. I have another question, but Wendy, do you want me to pass it back to you?
I
We
mean,
could go
if you
from
got
there.
another question is ready, like go for it.
I do. We have a small audience today, so I'm going to keep going because I'm so curious. This is awesome. Thank you so much. And thanks, Wendy, for bringing Christopher on. Okay, risks and dangers. Like,
Mm.
can you overdose? Are there contraindications? Can you do it too often? Like, what are these things that we should be aware of?
Yeah, yeah. So they haven't found an LD50. So, when Johns Hopkins has done two studies on salvia. The first one they did, I think it was in 2007 or 8, where they gave participants progressively higher doses of salvia just to see, what people can handle in a way, and also just to test the safety on human subjects, because they did a later study in 2018 that I was actually a part of, where they gave me a high dose of salvia while I was in an fMRI machine. Um, but in order to do human studies, they have to be able to prove to the FDA that it's extremely safe for human consumption. And so, in the late 2000s, they did their initial study where they gave people a dose and they just kept upping and upping and upping. And then it kind of got to a dose where, and this was a little bit over 1 milligram of pure salvinorin A. Salvinorin A is the active component in salvia. And so, it kind of got to the point where everyone sort of tapped out of the study. They were like, nope, I'm not going to come back for the next round next time, like, because that was just scary. And so that was slightly over 1 milligram. And so you can't really like overdose as far as it's like killing you. Um, there are no contraindications that I found with other medicines. If someone's taking naltrexone, it can dampen the effects of salvia. But I've done sessions with people who were taking low doses of naltrexone, and they had a completely fine experience. But it works with SSRIs. You can be on opioids, you can be on Adderall, you can um, on benzos, Wellbutrin, I've worked with all people with those substances. It also plays really nicely with other plant medicines. And that's a whole nother component of it as well, that salvia can be really, really helpful in integrating other medicine experiences. Um, and so the only danger per se is that if one has a high dose of salvia, people can get up and start walking around without realizing it, almost like they're in a fugue state, and they can trip and fall and hit their head. Um, Sometimes, if people smoke too high of a dose, they can feel as if they can feel as if the shift in perception is only happening within that room that they're in. And they think, I don't want to be in this experience anymore. So if I just leave the room, that'll end the journey. It's interesting that it just seems so objectively localized. And there have been a couple of stories, which just sounds like the cliche experience where people saw, oh, the window, I can get out there. And people actually jumped out the window. So there can be this, at a high dose, there can be this flight experience that happens with people where they just like bolt. So that's unsafe as far as the fact that you can, fall down some stairs or, have some physical harm coming to the body. But again, that would be at a much higher dose, but it's easy to take too high of a dose, especially when people smoke these concentrated extracts. So by extract, what I mean is, so you can take the plain salvia leaf, dry that, smoke that, and then that would be considered like 1x extract. And then you have 5, 10, 20x extract. So 10x means they take like 10 grams of leaf, extract the salvinorin A out of that, and then reinfuse that back onto 1 gram of leaf. So it becomes a lot more potent. So it's potent even as it is just smoking the plain leaf. But then you had these salvia providers making like 100 times strength extract. And so people were essentially overdosing, if you will, by smoking 100 times more than they should have been. But that that was generally so uncomfortable for people that they didn't want to do it again. So it's very self-regulating as far as that's concerned. Um, and then even if one has like a salvia practice, it just seems to be even with people with addictive personalities, it's very self-regulating. There's again just no draw and compulsion to go back and do it again. I know, like for me personally, I need to be very mindful about ketamine, because it can be like, ooh, ketamine, that's nice and fun. Come back and do it again. The same thing with cannabis. That can be like this allure to come back and do it again. But with salvia, it's just like, no, like it's just not there. But then when I do smoke salvia, I think, oh my gosh, this is so wonderful. I should do this more often. But then it just doesn't come to mind again. So one does sort of have to schedule it as a practice if you want any sort of consistency.
Fascinating. Thank you so much, Christopher. Let's hand it back over to our main host, Wendy, today. Thanks for that.
Um, what was interesting about what you just said, Christopher, is that you you were saying like it has to be like intentional is kind of where I got from that. And I'm very big on intention, the difference between like goal and intention. So what does, for my curiosity, what does like an intentional practice look like? You said, every like few months, or is this,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a microdosing coach, so I'm used to microdosing, practices, which are usually like a couple times a week and, for
Yeah.
several weeks at a time. So what would a practice with Salvia Dinorum look like? And
Mhm.
I'm assuming from a low and slow kind of approach, because that seems like what you're doing.
Right, right. Yeah. So I like to, like when I do guided sessions with people, I like to do 3 sessions with them to start off about a week apart from each other. And then as far as one's own personal practice is concerned, some people like to do it once a week. Some people like to do it for like 3 days in a row, then they take another couple days break, then they do 3 days in a row. Um, some people like to do it just once a month. And so I like to, I'm not too dogmatic about how I work. I'm also not too dogmatic about how I prescribe things should be done because I think it can be very personal. It can also be as needed, So some people, if they're just, I was, working with someone recently and he's going through a very challenging divorce. And when he just feels like everything is just too much for him, he'll smoke just a little bit of salvia and it'll just calm everything and have him come back to himself. So he does it as needed. Um, Many people find though that when they do have a practice, say that they do it twice a week or once a week, they find that their life just flows so much more easily, so much more effortlessly. There's much less resistance to getting things done. I know personally as well, when I smoke salvia, it's just, there's something about, and I don't know if it's that salvia gives one a forward feeling, like you can actually feel salvia moving you forward in your life. Salvia is actually really not concerned about your past very much. It's not about reflecting on your past and understanding your past. It's more about what's happening right now and what's the very next thing that you need to do. It's a very, very, very present moment medicine. Um, I was trying to deal with, I was like, oh, let's see, like, I wanted to bring a certain topic to salvia about my past, and so I smoked the salvia, and salvia was just like, "Oh man," like very compassionately, like, "I'm so sorry that happened, but also it's not really real anymore because it doesn't exist in the present moment, and holding on to it is not really serving you. So." What we can actually do is we can just kind of get rid of that. And I felt salvia literally taking my thoughts about that past experience away from me. So it can be quite like surgically extractive as far as removing unwanted thought patterns from one's habitual thinking. And so yeah, it's very being. How are you going to be engaged in the present moment without a sense of struggle or strife? And I think from that, it just leads to a feeling of not having any sort of resistance to getting those things done. It's kind of funny. I was working with someone a while ago and she had some wonderful salvia experiences. And she was like, oh, I'm going to give this to my husband because he likes things like this as well. And so the husband, he smoked salvia and she reported back to me a week later. She said it was so funny because I gave my husband like the exact same amount of salvia that you gave me, and he said he didn't feel anything at all. He was like, nope, doesn't work. I got zero effect. He's like, oh, I guess I must be immune to it. But what she said, what was amazing is the rest of that week, he was the most productive she's seen him in years. All of a sudden, all those little projects around the house started to get done. And I don't know if she even pointed it out to him. I think she was just observing. She was like, wow, like that thing that he said he wanted to do for years, he's doing it. Um, and so that was like kind of a nice little anecdote about how even if one doesn't feel the effects of salvia, um, and many times people do feel the effects, it's just knowing what to look for. Um, they're kind of looking for the wrong things, and so they miss what is there. And yeah, so even if one doesn't actually feel the effect, there's just this, um, it's like an anti-stagnation tool in a way. And people find synchronicities begin to happen more in their life as well. Yeah, so it's a very engaging in the present moment and engaging with your own life in a grounded, resourced way type of experience. So it's very Zen in that standpoint.
Okay, everything that you just said right now is right up my alley for so many reasons. Um, One of the things as a coach,
Mm,
I'm very much a coach and not a therapist. And
mm,
I say this lovingly, like, I don't really care why you're here, but like, what are
mm.
we going to do now? And I
Right.
obviously I care about the person,
Yeah.
but it's that same kind of thing. So, gosh, I knew there was a reason I wanted to have you on to talk to you. And I love that you brought up like the intention part. And then at the beginning you had talked about how you took 10 breaths and then smoked it and it was a completely different experience. Do you, is there like more of a practice? Does it work better if you take a few moments to anchor in? Um, and
Mhm.
out of curiosity, why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think you know, I think there's because it is such a I think there's something about, when you just take that little pause and you just take a breath, I think what's happening is it's just tapping you into more of the subtleties in your body. You're just becoming more aware of your nervous system. You're becoming more aware of what is currently there right now. And so then when you start to work with the salvia, it's sort of like if I smoke some salvia and my eyes are open and I'm kind of looking around the room and like moving and stuff like that, it can actually stop the experience and you don't really notice it. Some people say salvia can be shy like a deer, it can be there, but then any little movement and it can startle it and it can run away. And so with salvia, the stiller you are and the more quiet you are, the more you're going to notice. And so you can be sitting there still with your eyes closed and you're going to notice a whole lot more versus if your eyes are open and you're looking around at the room and things like that. And so, with intentionality, what I like to do is, before I smoke salvia, I like to actually address the salvia in the bowl. And I guess I'll show this. This is this 5 bowled water pipe that I manufacture and I send to my clients when we do a guided session because you preload all the bowls with a little bit of salvia and then you smoke it. And then when you're ready to move to the next one, you just pick up the bowls and rotate it and move to the next one. So you just cycle through them like that. And so I came to this because, in 2011, I think it was, or 2012, I asked myself the question, what's the smallest amount of salvia that I need to smoke in order to feel anything at all? And so I started with a teeny tiny amount and I smoked that. I didn't feel anything. Then I smoked another teeny tiny amount and I smoked that. Didn't feel anything. Waited a few minutes, smoked another teeny tiny amount. And what I noticed with that, I was just like, just everything settled in my system. And it kind of forced me into a meditative state. And I was just like, ooh, I don't even want to smoke another bowl right now because just being still and being silent and being locked into the stillness and my breath feels really pleasurable. Um, and I was like, okay, cool. So a tiny dose of salvia just makes you meditate essentially. Um, and so then I was wondering, okay, let me go deeper, deeper. But I kind of kept struggling with, while I was going deeper into salvia space, reloading bowls, because I was breaking my concentration and dosing a very accurate substance. And so, I thought to myself, okay, what if there was a device that you could load beforehand and it didn't exist? And so I decided to make it. So I make these all myself here at home, with some 3D printed parts and silicone that I pour. It's almost like baking a cake. Um, and so I'm kind of like a one-man shop. I grow all the salvia, I extract it myself, I provide them to people in the little pre-dosed amounts, and then I provide the pipe as well, and really just get one set up into how to do mindful small doses. But then what I like to do before I smoke salvia is I like to look at the salvia in the bowl that I'm about to smoke, and I just like to take a second to address it. And I like to say, hey, looking forward to seeing you again. Or sometimes I'll just say generic help. Or sometimes I think I have nothing to say, but then 5 minutes later, I'm still like waxing poetic about my life's problems. And so I just take that moment to connect with it. And yeah, it doesn't take much intentionality, just a little bit of intentionality, and it can look like how it feels right to you. If for you, your way of becoming intentional is I don't know, doing some push-ups and jumping jacks, then you can sit down and smoke it. Or if your way of becoming intentional is to smudge the room, you can do that. Or Salvia does a really good job of just meeting you where you are, um, in the way that it feels like it knows you will understand it best. For example, I work with some people who do a lot of IFS, internal family systems, and parts work. And then salvia presents itself to you where you're engaging with different parts of your being and different parts of yourself. And you can actually see where the wounded part lives within you, or you can see where this protector part is. And it's actually wonderful for parts work. But then there are other people who are long-term meditators, and salvia comes to them as a meditation teacher. Or there are other people who are therapists, and salvia comes to them more as like a creative visual guide. So yeah, it's very versatile as far as how it shows up. And I like to encourage people to find their own rhythm, find their own groove, find their own practice. And I like to be here as like a teacher and an on-ramper, just to show you how to interpret the experiences as well. But I'm also all about self-sufficiency.
Yeah. There's so many things that are spinning through my head right now. And I just want to say one of the things that when I first initially heard about salvia and kind of did a little bit, just briefly research and I skipped over the opioid stuff, but I kind of looked at the mechanisms of action on some of the other stuff. And one of the things that I found very fascinating about it and why it kind of piqued my mind was that it kind of opens up pathways for deeper interoception.
Mm,
And what I find, in, trauma healing, whatever conversation you want to go around that, there is a pretty good understanding that as you experience trauma, you kind of break that connection to your interoception. And I'm just
mm,
really loving how you're explaining a lot of this stuff because my mind is always overlapping, the science behind it. And very I very clearly can see how as you build your interoception, that it helps you connect with the parts of yourself that are not so reactive.
mhm,
And whether you say parts of yourself or you talk about networks in your brain, it's the same thing.
mhm.
But when your interoception is online, the networks in your brain that allow you to be less reactive
Right.
are online. And when you're disconnected from your interoception, which means like what's going on inside your body, then you're in a more reactive state. So it's kind of beautiful hearing you talk about these things from this plant.
Yeah.
So gosh, I mean, to me, it just seems like there's so many directions in which salvia can go and be useful because, like, as you said, it meets you where you are. That's
Right.
what kind of like that interoception, like it helps you unlock that kind of those parts of yourself that literally are like trapped behind your your
Right.
stress responses, you know?
Right.
Um,
Right. And, there's something I'll add, like one thing that Salvia can do as well is it can do a very good job of decoupling parts of your system that you thought were deeply intertwined with each other. It can actually split them out for you. So you can feel your physical body as a distinct thing right here. And then you can feel your emotional body here. And then you can feel your energetic body here. And Salvia can show you how they're separate and they can be intertwined, but just because one thing happens, it doesn't mean that the other thing has to happen. Like a concrete example was I was working with someone and he he started to get the feeling in his chest during the session that he gets when he's about to have a panic attack or when he's about to maybe just go to a place of high anxiety. He felt like the increased heart rate and he felt all the physiological responses that would happen before he goes down an anxious spiral. But he didn't feel any of the emotion associated with it. The emotion that was associated with those normal feelings was actually outside of his body currently. And so there was, in that experience, there was the decoupling between the physiological anxiety response and the emotional thoughts that are associated with it and how it actually affects his emotional body. And, Salvia said to him, it was like, hey, just because like your heart rate increases a little bit sometime, doesn't actually mean that you have to go down. Just because you're seeing this symptom right here, it doesn't mean that it has to have that cascading effect. And so it gave him a sense of objective neutrality about his own anxiety response. And so then he was just like, wow, this is amazing because I can actually feel what my body's doing right now clearly, but it's not actually activating the emotional trauma response. So he could be with the physical anxiety that was there without feeling the emotion, which meant that he could actually be more tuned into what was happening. And then it changed, it moved from his heart, it went down to his stomach, and then he could actually get into like the dialogue and tracking and seeing what's actually being communicated from my body when I'm having this physiological anxiety response. So it's almost like the emotional neutralizing mixed with the increased interoception gives you the capability to feel into the processes that your body is experiencing without it seeming like a threat.
yeah. Oh, okay. So just on, I'm looking at the time, so I want to be, I want to open this up, but I just this week posted an article about the difference between emotions and feelings. And
Hmm.
everything you said right there aligns perfectly with everything that I talked about. Except you combined emotions and feelings as one thing. So feelings are the thoughts that you have about the emotions. The emotions are the bioelectricity,
Mm,
like signal from your physical body to your mind. It's how your
mm,
mind and your body like interact. And so everything you said there like really
mm.
aligns with everything that I know from a different perspective. So it's really cool to see or see you talk about it from learning about this like from a plant, perspective as
Mm,
well
mm.
and a physical experience. But as I said, I could talk to you forever. And so I see the time and I want to open it up. So Dana, if you've got another burning question and then we'll open it up. And if not, I've got plenty. So
Yeah, thank you. I don't have another burning question. I'm just honestly like so fascinated and so intrigued, and it's just piquing my curiosity to continue learning more.
Mm.
and have the opportunity to try working with this beautiful plant medicine.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for all the work that you've done in
Mhm.
exploring and pioneering and
Mhm.
creating the cool little smoker thing and everything. So yeah, I'll definitely pass it over to the rest of our community, but thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and it's nice in that it's such a easily integratable plant medicine as well. You know, it's a short experience, you know, you can smoke a light dose of salvia, just only one dose if you want, meditate for 30 to 40 minutes, and then you're kind of back to yourself and you feel everything's brighter and life is flowing again. You know, you don't have to take the entire day off. You know, you don't have to because many people I work with, they have jobs and kids and lives, and you know, they're like, well, yeah, it'd be nice, but I have to go pick up my kid at a certain time, and so, you know, they can do their salvia meditation when they have like an hour break, and then and again, I don't like probably a lot of your users are probably microdosing or working with other medicines as well. And so it can just be helpful at if one has a big or challenging other medicine experience, a little bit of salvia does a really good job of making the experience make sense to your body. So it's a very good automatic integrator of other experiences.
Thank you, Christopher.
Hmm.
Yes. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. So I'm gonna open it up. If anyone has a question, please un un mic and come up here. And if you feel comfortable, take come off video or turn on your video and come up and come join us and ask questions. Or if you want to, you can also drop something in the chat if you want to join us as well there. Um, and if no one does, I got more. All right. Anyone coming up? Okay.
Don't be
So
shy.
then uh, I I I mean there was a few places I wanted to go with this. So I love the fact that you have your own 5 bowl
Mm,
thing because that I can see how that would be very difficult, like if you're
mm,
already in an experience.
mm,
Uh,
mm,
so when someone does kind of sit down for like a meditative, that's where I think I'm a little interested in right now because my population that I work with is ADHD people, and meditation is just a very difficult thing. I love breath work as a way to get in there.
mm,
Um, into that meditative state, but then, sometimes people still have trouble setting aside the time to even do 10 minutes of breath work.
mm,
Um, because I mean, I personally think that they're outsourcing their power still, and they haven't quite
mm,
learned the skill of taking it back. I like the idea of bringing this in a very tangible way to kind of teach people the skill of staying present
mm,
with what they're doing. Because even still, sometimes like with a microdose, um, you can hold it in your hand and then you take it, but it's still a bit of like letting go of it and
mm,
not
mm.
being present necessarily. Because at least
Right.
with the smoke, it's kind of there in your face.
Right.
I'm just gonna leave it there, and you can expand on that.
Yeah, yeah. I think one thing with you know, there's a way in which, you know, if you take your microdose, you microdose and then you can immediately go about your day. And you can, like you're saying, like kind of like put it in the back burner. But with salvia, you can like smoke it and then you can't do anything else right after you smoke the salvia, you know. So you're sort of like forced into, at least for that short amount of time, being present and being with it. And so yeah, I find that, you know, something with ADD, ADHD as well is there can be it can be hard to know what to focus on next in your life. There's like this scattered feeling like, oh, there's this over here, there's this over here, there's this over here, which is going to be the most important to do next. Um, you know, it's almost like there's multiple chitter chatter voices in your head all yammering on like a bunch of monkeys. And so with salvia, what it does is it quiets the mind and all those other little voices that are in there chattering away. whether it's your own internal voice or whether it's voices of other people or society that you've internalized as your own. Salvia does a really good job of just shutting them all up and just having you connect with your own authentic, true voice. Um,
Mm.
there's been a few people that when they start working with Salvia, they're like, oh, wow, it feels like I'm actually connecting with my authentic self. And so all those other little competing voices that are kind of getting in the way and, mucking up the signal become quiet on Salvia. And then you can connect with your own authentic voice. And from that, it gives you some clarity about like what to actually focus next in on your life, like what's truly important for you, not what's important with what you think you have to do. And so it's a very like yeah, just reconnecting you with what's going to be good for you. It's also very good at helping people set up boundaries, both with other people and with their own self. So this combination of dropping into the present moment, being able to set up boundaries, and getting in touch with your authentic voice clears away so much of the noise that if one does have ADHD, you can be like, okay, I at least know what the next thing is that I'm going to be doing. Or um, and oftentimes it's less what to do and more how to be while you're doing life. You can be doing the same thing, but you can be approaching it from a place of feeling like scattered and frenetic and frenzied and struggling, or you can be doing the exact same thing and just kind of feeling okay as you're doing it and just dropped in and focused. So it's less about what to do and more about like how to be. And it shows you how to be by taking you to that felt place of reconnection with yourself.
Mm, I love that. Um, you know, it's interesting because it's different than the traditional pharmaceutical model, which is very much take a pill. So
Mm,
since you said that it can't be administered through, like, doesn't go through digestion, so it's either smoking or through the cheeks, right?
mhm,
Uh,
mhm.
that 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 makes me wonder about how it kind of like will how do we get the message across about salvia?
Yeah,
And is that counterintuitive to the messaging that you said salvia sometimes gives about keeping it to yourself? Like
right,
how
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
both kind
know.
of coincide.
Yeah, I know exactly. So yeah, so they have tried to make painkillers that affect the kappa opioid receptor system. And because it's non-addictive, it's not habit forming, but it's a powerful painkiller. And so they've tried to like make, like I guess, a Tylenol or type medicine that affects the kappa opioid receptor system, but it doesn't take effect. But I mean, it works, but it can bring about a feeling of dysphoria rather than euphoria. And again, when the kappa opioid receptor system is activated, you kind of have to be with it. So there's something about it that lends itself to be unable to be made into a mass medicine that you can just pop a pill and be mindless about it. So there's something about the neurochemistry with it that forces you to have to be with it. Um, and that just wouldn't work on a mass scale. You couldn't say to someone, here's your painkiller, but in order for it to work in the meantime, you have to meditate while you take it. Like no one's gonna be buying that. Um, and yeah, so it's this funny pull or push. Like it can be helpful for so many people, but the experience can be so personal and private and intimate as well. Yeah, so that's something I've considered myself. How does one actually, yeah, what is the future of this plant going to look like as far as how it starts to incorporate itself into, regular people's lives? And I think that the way in which it shows up is that you just sort of have to be ready for it. You have to be able to approach it with some intentionality. You have to have a certain level of emotional maturity. You can't just do it for shits and giggles. So it's there for the right people at the right time. And I think that's more than good enough.
Yeah. I was thinking about like the cannabis industry and what you had said earlier about how people were extracting and then it to 10 times and then putting it onto the leaf, and
Mm,
how the cannabis industry has changed so much. Like the cannabis today is not my mama's cannabis, you know?
right. That's for
Um,
sure.
and just thinking about how that just I think it's cool that that is not really a possibility with salvia, because higher doses of salvia do not mean more fun dissociative. They just mean more.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of like a natural break on capitalist more
Right.
and more
Yeah,
ideas.
yeah. And the nice thing about it as well is it's very sustainable. Like it's easy to grow at home. You don't have to be extracting it from some other resource or from some other culture or for some other place. You can grow it yourself, you can chew it yourself, you can smoke it yourself. It can just grow in a regular potted plant that you have in your windowsill. And so I like that as well, where it's kind of like low maintenance. It's pretty easy to grow, and it doesn't require huge resources. And so once you have one plant, you can make clones of it and take cuttings and just kind of be self-sustainable as well. So it can sort of be like a everyman's medicine.
Mm. I was thinking about that earlier. I'm glad you mentioned it because I was going to ask you. It was one of the questions I had. I'm glad you brought it up about can you have it at home? Because I remember earlier you said it likes to be in shade, high humidity, well fertilized, draining soil. But I
Mm.
was like, can you, do that at home in that
Mhm.
same kind of thing? So that's
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Mm, mm.
cool. Um, Flavor wise, I know this sounds silly, but you kind of had mentioned that it's not doesn't have much of a flavor, but it's in the mint family. Does it have a flavor? Like, is it bad? Because you said people chew
There,
it also. Is it
it's
bad
very,
to taste, or what is it? What is it
yeah,
like?
it tastes very bitter.
Okay.
I like the taste. The fresh leaves are less bitter than the dried leaves. Um, but yeah, it doesn't, you couldn't use it as a culinary item. Yeah, it tastes like a bitter green leaf.
Bitter green leaf. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Mm.
Because I do chew rosemary.
Mm.
So I
Mhm.
learned a long time ago. I came across a random study. Surprise, surprise. I read a study uh, where it talked about chewing rosemary,
Mm.
like just a couple leaves chewing rosemary is more effective than any Alzheimer medication.
Yeah,
Uh,
huh.
yeah, but
Interesting.
it's not very tasty, but it's still the most effective thing that you can do. So, or
Yeah.
at least at the time, things might have changed now, but so I try to plop a couple rosemary leaves in
Mm.
every so often when I think about it. Um, so if you do chew the salvia though, and it just kind of hangs out there, you will have an experience, right?
Yeah.
Um, is there like a way to microdose where you're not having some where you feel it or
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, there is. And I'm just gonna let my dog out. He's right there. I'm just gonna open the sliding door because he's looking at me like he probably needs to pee. Okay, out you go.
So while he's doing that, I just looked up, I was getting quite excited about this. So I just looked up and realized that I am going to need to come stateside for my salvia experiences. In 2010, Canada officially banned Salvia Divinorum and scheduled it Schedule 3. So it is possession, production, trafficking, and importation of salvia are illegal in Canada. So I'll be
Mm.
stateside for this experiment.
Um,
I mean, there are lots of people who are using salvia in Canada. I mean, same way that I think there's lots of people who are using all those substances. But I'm not going to promote anything illegal.
yeah.
Well, and I'm on a public show, so I'm saying I'm coming to the States.
Right. Mm, mm,
Um, yeah, Oh, that's a bummer. The whole legalization thing is just crazy. Like,
It's so
how,
crazy.
Mhm.
These are plants. They're sacred plant medicines. They're like belong
Mhm.
to all of us. I don't
Right,
know.
right.
I
Anyways, that's
know,
a whole other topic.
I
Yeah,
know.
and the thing is as well is salvia itself doesn't again, it doesn't smell like anything, it doesn't look like anything, it looks like green tea, you know. Um so and no one's getting busted for salvia or anything like that. But still, it's yeah, the whole war on drugs, blah, you know. Mm, mm,
Yeah. Um, so real quick about like, the sweet spot kind of scenario.
mm.
And I know I know you talked about like really difficult, way too much where you might want to escape and obviously you don't want
Right,
to do
right.
that. Is there also like a so like say with LSD, there is a place in between a microdose where you're not feeling anything and then you're on a full trip
Mm,
and there is
right,
an uncomfortable spot.
right,
It,
right.
does salvia have that same kind of experience as well?
Yeah, it does. There's what one can do as well, if you really want to microdose it, is you can make a tea out of it as well. But that's very, very weak. And so what you can do is you can take the dried leaves and you can boil them in hot water for about 15 minutes. And then if you add a little bit of salt, it'll cut the bitterness in it. A little bit of salt and honey. And then what you can do is take that sip of tea and then hold it in your mouth for about a minute and then swallow that. And then take another sip, hold it in your mouth for about a minute and swallow that. And that then gives one you won't really feel the effects. It's kind of nice before bed. It'll actually help you sleep quite deeply and it increases the vividness of your dreams. Or if you have like an actual plant itself, you can just chew like, even if I were to just pick like, just a leaf like this and chew it and you can just have it there, that'll be microdosy.
Mhm.
And or again, you could even just smoke like the salvia that are provided in those little like pre-dose gel caps. You can smoke half of one of those doses, and that'll just drop you into the space a little bit. So yeah, it's also quite wonderful for microdosing.
Yeah, because there was something about what you said. I'm so glad to hear that you can do it that way, ingest it that way, because I think I love teas. Like I'm a big fan of like blue lotus tea, red lotus
Mm.
tea, pink lotus tea, like all kinds of different teas, chamomile, butterfly pea flower, passion flower, right? They all have these, plants have these beautiful profiles that the ones that are not illegal, we don't think twice about. Like if I tell someone that I'm having a passion flower and butterfly, pea flower tea, they're like, "Oh, that sounds lovely. What does it taste like?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's because I'm feeling a little anxious and I know that this is going to help a little bit, you know, help settle me, and it's less about the flavor of it and it's more about the 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 co-creation, part of it. But
Right.
because it's legal, no one like I can talk about it all day long. I
Yeah.
can talk about a whole bunch of plants all day long that are
Mm,
super supportive
mm, mm.
and that's acceptable. But then, because you have a slightly altered state of mind, which I would think that also becoming less anxious is an altered state of mind from being
Right.
anxious.
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't know. To me, it's just all crazy. But thank you
Yeah.
for
So
sharing the
are they
tea.
gonna are they gonna outlaw breath work because it alters your consciousness? I mean. Mm,
Yeah.
mm,
Um, I do see a thing in the chat about from our friend Jordan, which
mm.
says, "What is the neuroplasticity profile for salvia?"
That's a good question. So, there's a few things. So when they did the research at Johns Hopkins and they did the MRI scan, they showed that salvia affects the default mode network more than any other psychedelic, which is kind of interesting because everyone's talking about mushrooms and LSD as far as how it affects the default mode network. But salvia has a much stronger effect on the default mode network by an order of magnitude than any other substance. And so one of the things that's responsible for is our autobiographical sense of ourself. And so with salvia, you sort of like lose that autobiographical sense of yourself, and that's what also helps you just drop into the present moment. Um, but what they've also found, I think, with research in neuroplasticity is not necessarily substance dependent. It's more about what I was talking to this neuroscientist from Berkeley here about it, and she was saying that novelty is what creates neuroplasticity more than anything else. And so if
Mm.
you have a novel experience, that's what creates neuroplasticity. And so there's something about the Salvi experience itself that is more novel and unique than anything else that there is, you know? And so I think I will say that, I think if one continues to work with salvia, I don't know if it creates more kappa opioid receptors or it makes you more sensitive to it based on that standpoint. Um, but I don't know if they've done a specific study on salvia saying it creates more neuroplasticity, but um, from the vantage point of having a novel experience, that's going to then create more neuroplasticity.
Mm. Okay.
And then you said, this helps explain Patrick's claim that salvia is the absolute weirdest of all substances. Exactly. So it's the most weird and it's the most novel. But the thing is, as you continue to work with it as well, it becomes very familiar, it becomes very comfortable, it becomes very supportive, it becomes very grounding. So that's why I like to say as well, you do need to do it like a handful of times just to figure it out and see like what exactly is up here. Um, and once you've gotten into, you've used it a handful of times, you're like, oh, okay, I know what I'm getting into. I know what it feels like, and it becomes like seeing an old friend. There's a sense of familiarity that comes with salvia as well.
I love that. Uh, I mean, you gave such amazing information. I am so I'm so glad you came on to talk to us about this. I'm so
Likewise.
excited now to learn more about salvia and actually work with salvia. Like you set it in stone for me. It's happening. Um, so before we go, is there any last questions you have, Dana? And then I'll turn it over to Christopher.
Yeah, I think we've covered what I want to today, which just as I said, it's just piqued my interest to continue to learn. And thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your experience and your wisdom.
Yeah, yeah, you're most welcome. Thank you so much. Um, yeah, I mean, my website is salviahealings.com. I do free 20-minute consultations with people. I also have the Somatic Salvia Network, which is somaticsalvianetwork.com. And it's a little community of people. We have like integration calls and a group chat. And it's a group of people who are using salvia mindfully for therapeutic purposes. And yeah, I do the guided sessions via Zoom. There's other podcasts I've done floating around out there. And yeah, there's a lot to learn. It's an interesting journey, and I'm here to help.
Thank you so much. As I said, really appreciate this and you're sharing your knowledge, sharing this plant, making it more approachable and less scary.
Mm,
You
mm,
know, because
mm.
do a search on Reddit and you might get really scared about
Right,
salvia.
right. Hmm.
Um, and it just sounds like such a beautiful companion to life as we know it. So
Hmm.
with that being said, um, next week, who do we have next week, Dana?
Next week is Victoria Sitanovic. She is a lawyer who is specializing in supporting psychedelic organizations, psychedelic companies, and people in their fights against censorship on social media and online. There's been such a crackdown on psychedelic education sites and social media accounts. So how can we keep ourselves safe? And if your account does get deleted or shut down, what can you do about it?
Oh, I should join that because my Instagram used to be Salvia Healings, but then I got shadow banned because of the word salvia. So
Yep.
now my new Instagram is Somatic Mentor. Yeah, but then I just realized the other day I tried to send an email via MailChimp, and it had the word salvia in, and MailChimp was like, "Sorry, we're not sending this for you." And I was
My
like, "Wow,
God.
this is like mega censorship," and I'm just providing education. And salvia itself should be such a. So I think with the whole rise of AI, it's just scanning everything out the wazoo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean
Hmm.
Meta's own guidelines say that education and discussion is fine, but when you just throw an AI bot in there to like search for the
Yeah,
words, there's no context, right? So, anyways, yeah, let's dive into that next week. Come and join us, Christopher.
yeah.
It'll be good. Victoria's done like hundreds of accounts, so.
Wow, good.
Oh, I'm excited to learn about that too. So thanks again, Christopher. Go check out the show notes to get his links. I maybe even purchase one of his little 5 bowl thing. I think that's brilliant, and I'm excited to check that out and learn more about this beautiful plant. And with that, I'm going to close out the room the way I love to close out the room. So everyone who's here, I invite you to unmic with us and let's all take a big deep breath in together. And now let's sigh or grunt it out.
With the support and the community of the Flourish Academy behind you, may you all go forth and flourish. Ending the
Yay.
show in. You got to end
Five,
it, though.
5, 4, 3, 2,